All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, in an historic week with an impeachment vote centered around the Biden family business and a debate on the schedule for tonight, the New York Times decided to dig in deep on the frontrunner's record. What would they tackle? The multi-decade-long trail of grift that his family has left in their wake? His role in architecting the modern-day equivalent of Jim Crow? Of course, I'm talking about the racist and classist mass incarceration system. What he knew and when as vice president about the lies fed to the American people about the great progress we were supposedly making in Afghanistan. Nope. Instead, they went with this. Joe Biden is sounding like a pundit, and he's bullish on a certain former VP, because apparently it's big news that candidate X likes candidate X's chances. Now, I wouldn't hold your breath for the media to dig in deep on the Biden legacy here anytime soon. To do so would require reflection on the utter failings of the neoliberal consensus of the past 3 decades, and well, we simply can't have that. The inability of the media to effectively challenge Biden, coupled with his rivals' fear of going after him directly lest they offend the Barack Obama stance, has quite effectively inoculated Biden up to this point. No one has less business being the frontrunner, and yet there he is, challenging voters to push-up contests, bumbling through sleepy time rallies, and promising the wealthy that on his watch, nothing will fundamentally change. Hanging out at the top of the polls the whole time. On Monday, I made the case that Biden, whose support has consistently hovered between 25% and 28%, could in fact be vulnerable. All of this is to say that Biden isn't somehow uniquely impervious to any sort of critique. We've already seen in this campaign the potential for a well-executed blow to land. I do think, though, his long history with voters makes it a bit more difficult. Voters have a solidly favorable impression of him, and they feel like they know who he is. That's why it's so important that you nail all 3 elements, and in particular, that you come at him on the right issue, an area of core concern. What might that be? Now, with his decades in office, there's certainly a lot of material to work with for Joe. After all, he carried water for the credit card companies, memorably clashing actually with Elizabeth Warren. He was a champion of the corporate pro-free trade agenda that decimated much of the working class he claims to have such affinity for. He helped Bush build the case for a war that was perhaps the biggest and most devastating blunder of modern American history. Those are all arguments that move me, but let's be honest, not exactly your typical Biden voter. For much of the Democratic base, Biden has a sort of warm, fuzzy glow. The way he communes with others in their grief is truly, genuinely moving. His loyalty to the nation's first black president is viewed with high regard. He has, in most surveys, the second highest favorability rating after Bernie Sanders. Now, part of what I learned watching Republicans launch ridiculous attacks on Barack Obama that ultimately completely failed is that you got to meet voters where they are. People generally like Obama. He was a good family man. Except for the rabid Republican base, it simply was not believable that he was some radical jihadi terrorist looking to fundamentally transform America. Ultimately, swing voters just didn't buy it. While they did buy the effectively prosecuted case that Mitt Romney was the dude who your company hires to fire you, because that 100% rang true. With a 70% Democratic Party approval rating, people like Joe. They're not going to go from warm and fuzzy to he's a villain who helped hollow out America and create the right-wing reactionary monster of Donald Trump overnight. But that's not to say they don't have concerns. Obama himself, I'm sure, doesn't see Joe Biden as a villain, but nonetheless has enough concerns that he's recused himself in the Democratic primary outside of occasional passive-aggressive attacks on Bernie. You can just imagine Obama giving Biden a patronizing pat on the shoulder. Sure, you asked me not to endorse you, Joe. Whatever you say. For Biden voters currently on the fence, which is about 40% of them according to the polls, I think what could land is a somewhat more gentle approach, more bless his heart and less unvarnished outrage. Biden voters fundamentally trust that he is well-intentioned. It'll be hard to move them off of that view because, frankly, he does come across as sincere in his many terrible ideas. But I think the concerns arise when it comes to judgment. Biden voters may be quite receptive to the argument that he's bumbled his way from bad idea to bad idea, Uncle Joe style, and would therefore not only make a cartoonishly bad president, but would be chum for a hungry Trump. Just think about his look fat dust-up with that voter challenging him to a push-up contest and running an IQ test, etc. Even in such a brazenly ugly moment, people didn't really question his good intentions. Plenty even bought his campaign's ridiculous spin that he was saying, "look facts," because the warm feelings towards him are just so pervasive. So why fight on that ground when you can make the much easier pitch that, look, he may have meant well, but he was wrong? He was wrong on plagiarism, he was wrong on busing, wrong on trickle-down, wrong on criminal justice, wrong on banking deregulation, wrong on NAFTA, wrong on Iraq, wrong, wrong, wrong. That bad judgment carries over to his personal affairs, where he let Hunter and other family members cash in on the family name. And that bad judgment carries over to today, where he's already running the same failed playbook as the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, me personally, I think Biden's career has been shaped far more by political expediency and big donor money than by principle or good intentions. But the candidates don't have to fight that unwinnable battle of trying to convince voters of what's in their opponent's heart. All that needs to be done is to remind voters of the decades of blundering into disaster that comprise the entire career of Joe Biden. So who's up for it? Media's not going to do their job. The one candidate who halfway landed a blow is out of the race, and the longer you wait, the more solid his support becomes. Will anyone come for the king tonight? Warren's been squabbling with Pete, but she does have an older history of taking Biden to task. Bernie's thrown a few counter punches when Biden has come after him, but overall has been rather deferential to his friend, Joe Biden. Will Pete take a break from undermining progressive priorities with industry-approved talking points to go after some of Biden's moderate voters? If any of these people actually want to win, it is time for them to stop messing around and to take some risks. I don't know if I really expect any of them to go after him tonight, but it's time. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes.
Yeah, it is time, because right now he's going to win. That's ultimately what it looks like. He's going to coast to the nomination, and his chances against Trump are shaky at best. And that is something that a lot of these people, they just cannot wrap their heads around. And if you are one of the other people on that stage, you have got to step up. And like you said, you don't have to be mean about it like Julian Castro.
Right.
You don't have to be Eric Swalwell about it. Bernie actually had his hand on the pulse whenever he's like, let's talk about your record. Iraq, PNTR with China, but he could only do that in a very, very small circumstance. You need to do it over, and in politics, you have to say something 50 times before it really starts to register. And they just refuse to prosecute their case against Joe. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren squabbling with Pete Buttigieg, they treat these as campaign rallies. They're not. They're opportunities of contrast, and you got to step up.
Well, and here's the thing, too. It's not all entirely in your control. So, like, I actually think that the attacks that Bernie launched, as you mentioned a couple times, were effective. But Joe never really had to grapple with it, so it didn't totally land. The reason why Kamala's attack at least initially landed before she sort of screwed it up by making it clear how premeditated it was and herself waffling on the core issue around busing, but it did initially land because he didn't have a response, because he handled it so poorly.
And she forced it, and Bernie didn't force it. But Biden literally raised his hands like, what do you want from me, people?
And then moved on.
And then everybody moved on. The moderators moved on, all the candidates. You have got to begin to prosecute your case. It has been shown time and time again, or you're not going to break out, and he's going to be the nominee.
Yeah, no, that's it. And look, it wouldn't take much. I mean, if he's hovering around 26 points, right? He only needs to drop down a few points, especially in those early states. Put him down in second or third place in Iowa and New Hampshire, and that's all that you need. So it wouldn't take that much to totally shift the dynamic of the race. But again, the longer you wait, and what we've seen in the polls over the past couple weeks is him ticking up a little bit in support as Pete falls off, as Warren falls off, as the race solidifies, as people start to get serious, he's starting to consolidate his support. So tonight is one of the last chances that candidates have to really ding him and start to bring him back down to earth.
Exactly. As I've said, when you want to defeat somebody, you attack their center of gravity. His center of gravity is electability.
That's it.
And you know what's not electable? The same policies of the last 45 years. Simple case, but somebody needs to make it.
Somebody's got to have the courage to make it. Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.